My grandfather gifted me money to study abroad, but my parents secretly used it to pay for my sister's college tuition. Losers don't deserve to study abroad, they laughed. So I cut ties with my parents and hired a lawyer to sue them. But more facts came to light. I had a happy childhood in a very ordinary family. We went on picnics with my parents and I have memories of running through the park, accompanied by my mother's warm smile. Everything felt like an irreplaceable treasure. However, everything changed the moment my sister was born. Her name is Samantha. She joined our family when I was 6 years old. I understood even then how adorable a newborn baby could be. Both my parents adored Samantha, delighting in her every move. I never imagined that this would gradually begin to constrict my heart. My mother clearly started devoting more time and affection to Samantha. It began with small things. When I came home from elementary school, snacks were delayed because my mother was busy with Samantha. These small things escalated. From a young age, Samantha was flexible, and once my mother recognized her talent, she started taking her to ballet classes. The weekends were nearly consumed by driving her to and from ballet, and our family's plans revolved around her practices and recitals. Even when I wanted to go to the zoo, I was briskly dismissed with, "We don't have time for that." Family trips were similar. The chosen destinations were always places Samantha was interested in, and I quietly suppressed my own desires. By the time I was in middle school, the daily household chores had become my responsibility. After school, cleaning, laundry, and preparing dinner became my routine tasks, all because my mother wanted to focus on Samantha's practice. This felt beyond mere helping out at times. I felt treated like a servant, and the hardest part was the silent pressure from my mother. Even while I studied, she would frown and ask, "Aren't you done with the laundry yet?" I never heard the words, "Thank you for always helping out with the housework," or, "You're doing great," which I longed for. On the other hand, Samantha always received kind words like, "You were wonderful on stage," or, "You're really doing well." I felt isolated in my own home, and even when I tried to assert my place in the family, my mother always brought the conversation back to Samantha. As Samantha received accolades for her ballet, I supported her with mixed feelings, but believed in my heart that one day, my own worth would be recognized. I dreamed of the day when I could truly live my life freely. By my third year in middle school, I was determined not to expect anything from my family anymore. I had to carve out my own life. By focusing on school club activities and planning to find a part-time job, I began to create my own world. It felt much freer and more authentic. Throughout high school, I worked harder than anyone else and kept my grades at the top of my class. As a result, I received an offer from a prestigious overseas university to study there as a scholarship student with a full tuition waiver. The only issue was covering my living expenses abroad. I brought up this topic during dinner after returning home from school one day. I heard from my teacher that I can study abroad as a scholarship student. The tuition is waived, so if you could just help with the living expenses, I said, my heart swelling with hope. My mother put down her chopsticks and sighed deeply. "That's a great opportunity, but we just can't afford it," she said. "What?" I was stunned by the unexpected response. My father continued, "Samantha is going to start lessons with a famous teacher next year, and that's going to be expensive. Supporting her dream is our top priority." "But what about my dream? This is the result of all my hard work," I argued desperately. My mother looked at me with a slightly cold gaze. "We simply don't have the money to cover your living expenses abroad. Why are you asking for something impossible?" Their words pierced me like a knife. Was my effort really worth so little compared to my sister's dream? Unable to secure my parents' support, I had to give up on the idea of studying abroad. Instead, I decided to attend a local university. "Why do I have to be the only one who sacrifices?" I repeated to myself over and over. Each time, feelings of frustration and loneliness welled up inside me. Still, I had to move forward. Determined to carve out a life on my own terms, I chose a new path. However, just as I was about to graduate from high school, a sudden piece of news came. My grandfather had passed away due to illness. From a young age, my grandfather had always shown me particular affection. When I heard of his death, an indescribable sadness filled my heart. His presence had been significant in my life, and I vividly remember the summer vacations we spent together, and how seriously he listened to my plans for further studies. It felt as though a huge hole had been left in my heart. While mourning my grandfather, I graduated from high school and began attending a local university. As a university student, I juggled lectures and assignments while working as a tutor and at a bar in the evenings. I was driven by the desire to fund my own study abroad someday. As I was getting used to balancing my studies and part-time job, I found myself cleaning my mother's room as usual. There I discovered an old envelope. It was addressed to me. Casually checking its contents, I found a letter from my grandfather. It stated that he had left me a substantial inheritance from my study abroad expenses. Tears overflowed from my eyes upon learning this fact. It was a moment mixed with joy for my grandfather's support and anger towards my parents who had kept this hidden. Why should my dreams be cut off by family choices? Is it acceptable to trample on my grandfather's intentions? These questions raced through my mind. I asked my mother about the letter from my grandfather. Her face changed color immediately, trying to maintain her composure. I was planning to give it to you, but somehow forgot, she said, lining up a common excuse that tightened my heart. But why didn't you give it to me immediately? If I had read the letter, I wouldn't have had to give up on studying abroad. As I pressed her, my mother shrugged lightly and said, Sorry. I was just too busy with Samantha at the time and forgot about it. Her insincere apology only added to my confusion. Are we done here? As if to protect herself, my mother tried to end the conversation. After speaking with my mother, I continued to harbor mixed feelings. When I inquired about the letter and the inheritance, my mother's vague answers returned. The conflict between not being able to believe her words about forgetting and hesitating to push too hard swirled inside me. Despite these emotions, I continued my days dedicated to making my study abroad dreams a reality by focusing on my studies and part-time job. As soon as my university lectures ended, I would head to the bar where I worked as a bartender. Initially, even taking drink orders was a challenge, but gradually I honed my cocktail-making skills and found the space to enjoy conversations with customers. There were regulars who began to request their unique cocktails directly from me, which gave me a great sense of accomplishment. One night, a regular customer who always sat at the same counter seat spoke up. You work very seriously. When I come to this bar, I always end up wanting to talk to you. His words brought warmth to my weary heart. As I listened to him, it turned out that he was the president of a top-tier hotel. He was keenly interested in how I started this job and what I aimed for in the future. Slightly nervous, I shared my dreams. Actually, I would like to study hospitality and culture abroad someday. That's why I'm saving money while continuing my studies. He listened silently to my earnest explanation, then smiled and said, Your attitude is admirable. Would you like to come and see our hotel? It was a surprising offer. Never had I imagined that working diligently at a bar could lead to an opportunity directly connected to my dreams. Slightly bewildered, I gratefully accepted his offer. A few days later, guided by him, I visited the top-tier hotel, which far surpassed my imagination with its elegant interior and meticulous service. I was overwhelmed yet deeply moved. During the tour, he told me, the experience here will definitely be useful for your future. Would you like to work here? I was taken aback by his words, filled with gratitude for this unexpected opportunity. I felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of growing in this place. Thank you. I would like to cherish this opportunity, I said, and decided on the spot to take the job. From then on, my life changed significantly. My days began to revolve around university lectures by day and working at the hotel by night. The job at the hotel was tougher than I expected with a lot to learn, but as I sincerely engaged in each task, I absorbed new knowledge and skills. Supported by colleagues and superiors, I gradually earned their trust. In this way, I took my first steps in carving out a life on my own terms. After graduating from university, I started working full-time at the hotel, utilizing my cocktail skills and customer service abilities learned during my student days, and gradually mastering new tasks. Through the challenging experiences at the hotel, I felt myself growing bit by bit. After getting a job at the hotel, I moved out of my family home and started living alone. While I felt the sadness of leaving the familiar home, I was also thrilled with the anticipation of independence. My small yet clean apartment symbolized freedom and challenge. 2 years into my hotel job, my sister successfully graduated from high school and was accepted into the vocational school she had longed for. When I heard the news, I felt truly happy for her and proud of her efforts. One day, I received a call from my mother's sister. By the way, did you know Samantha is going to study abroad to join a ballet company? It seems like it was expensive, but you guys must have saved up properly. Study abroad? Savings. As I responded with curiosity, my aunt continued nonchalantly, Well, it's quite a psalm, isn't it? And they managed to send you to university too. Impressive, isn't it? Feeling uneasy with her words, I decided to confirm with my mother. Mom, is it true Samantha is studying abroad? How did you manage the expenses? My mother's expression stiffened for a moment, but she quickly composed herself and answered, We paid for it with the money we had saved up for her. Is there a problem? At that moment, I could not hide my turmoil. I vividly remember when I expressed my desire to study abroad. My mother had firmly stated, We don't have that kind of money. At that time, I had no choice but to give up my dream. Yet there was saved money for my sister. Knowing this fact, I felt a tightness in my chest. Why is their treatment of us so different? Every time I felt that my sister was more valued, childhood memories resurfaced. Me being denied the things I longed for while she easily got them as if it were natural. Emotions that had been simmering in my heart for a long time resurfaced. Is there a problem? My mother's casual question seemed to leave no room for imagining the impact I felt. That's why it hurt even more. I wanted to be valued too. I couldn't deny that feeling within me. From that day, I started to distance myself from my parents. The hotel job became a refuge for me, and I found myself immersed in it. Amidst the busy days, I was trying to regain myself. Even when I returned home tired, the sense of accomplishment from work began to support me little by little. One day, my parents suddenly called me home to talk, and there was an ominous air about it. With a sense of dread, I headed to my parents' house. Amidst various anxious thoughts, I was not prepared for what awaited me. Upon entering the house, my father seemed unusually subdued. When I asked, "What's wrong?" my mother opened her mouth with a puzzled look. "Actually, your father was deceived by a friend and lost a lot of money." Surprised, yet trying to grasp the situation, I asked, "How much are we talking about?" Maintaining my composure, I pressed for details, and my mother answered in a low voice, "About $40,000. It was money we had borrowed." $40,000? How are you going to repay it? That's why we have a favor to ask. Could you lend us some money just for a while? Confused by the unexpected proposal, yet seeing my mother's earnest expression, I was at a loss for words. However, unable to abandon my family, I eventually agreed to temporarily provide funds by setting up a new account. "All right, but please make sure to repay the money once things settle down." "Thank you. It really helps us a lot," my mother said with tears in her eyes. My father also apologized with a look of regret. However, the unease lingering in the air was not entirely dispelled. Months later, on Thanksgiving, I returned home after a long absence, enveloped by nostalgic smells. As I opened the door, the savory scent of turkey roasting wafted from the back. In the living room, my parents sat on the sofa, and Samantha, who had returned home temporarily from her studies abroad, was there too. Next to her sat her boyfriend. I was a bit surprised and felt a twinge of wariness inside. Samantha was laughing and talking happily with him, and my father began to speak joyfully as he watched them. "Look, isn't Samantha's boyfriend handsome? Plus, he works at that top-tier company," he said. My mother also nodded proudly, unconsciously boasting about Samantha's boyfriend. Each word tightened my chest, and my gaze shifted away. "Mom, you mentioned recently that studying abroad was expensive for Samantha. What happened with that?" I asked cautiously. My mother quickly responded, "Well, she improved her grades, so I gave her a bit more money. But her boyfriend helps out a lot, so it should be fine. His parents like Samantha a lot and support her too." Samantha's boyfriend's parents were wealthy and well-known locally. His family owned a large estate known for hosting lavish parties each year. His father was the CEO of a well-known company, and his mother was a socially influential figure. When Samantha started dating him, I was astounded by his family's status and wealth. The conversation continued with stories about Samantha and her boyfriend. Initially, I listened with a smile, but gradually I grew weary. As the boasts about his achievements and romantic surprises continued without end, I nodded along while inwardly sighing. Even during this precious family time, the focus was solely on her and her boyfriend. I tried to change the subject, but Samantha paid no heed, and I ended up just listening silently. A few days after Thanksgiving, I went to the local supermarket to pick up some groceries. As I walked through the store, I suddenly heard my name called from behind. Turning around, Aunt Dorothy stood there with a smile. "Oh, it's been a while. How have you been?" "Aunt Dorothy, it's been a long time. I'm doing well, and you haven't changed a bit." "Thank you. By the way, have you heard about Samantha's engagement party?" "An engagement party?" Surprised, I listened as my aunt continued cheerfully. "Yes, they're planning it for next spring in Hawaii." "In Hawaii? That sounds incredibly lavish." "Yes, they're inviting his family too, so it'll be a bit of a trip." "You're going, right?" Caught off guard by the sudden news, I clenched my shopping basket. "No, I haven't heard anything yet. How will the party expenses be managed?" "You don't need to worry about that. Dad left Samantha an inheritance, which will be used for that." "An inheritance?" I gasped at the unexpected revelation. While suppressing the urge to confront further, I ambiguously replied, "Is that so?" But I felt a turmoil inside me. Believing my own efforts had limits, I hired a detective to investigate, and it was revealed that my parents were using the study abroad funds left to me by my grandfather for Samantha's engagement party in Hawaii without my knowledge. Moreover, the lavish plan amounted to more than $40,000. I felt there was something beyond my imagination hidden in my parents' plans, and this realization sparked decisive anger. All the feelings of alienation, unfairness, and being unloved that I had long felt suddenly exploded. One night, taking advantage of my parents being out, I went to my family home and logged into my mother's computer. What I found was more unbelievable than I had anticipated. Information that had been hidden from me now came into view one by one, making my chest tighten. Various reservation details were recorded there. Carefully and with intense emotion, I reviewed the details of the travel booked for Samantha's engagement party. A lavish holiday plan in Hawaii costing over $40,000 was neatly arranged. Initially, the amount didn't seem serious to me, but as I sat there, every feeling of unfairness I had felt lined up before my eyes. I canceled all reservations except for the travel costs. It wasn't about retrieving the large sum of money, but intended as a retaliation against my parents. My initial calmness was nowhere to be found. I proceeded driven by emotion. After confirming the cancellations, I quietly left the house. In the car on the way back, I decided to cut ties with my parents. I felt there was no point in continuing this relationship any longer. As planned, my parents and sister went to Hawaii, but upon their arrival, they learned that all reservations for the hotel and the engagement party had been canceled. My parents were shocked and unable to understand what had happened, attempting to contact me immediately. However, I had already blocked their contacts and no calls or messages could reach me. The situation quickly deteriorated, but I accepted my decision quietly without any regrets. Ultimately, my sister and her boyfriend, along with his parents, had to explain the situation and bear the costs. Later, I heard from my aunt that Samantha had boastfully posted about her engagement party on social media, making my heart ache. I couldn't bear how it seemed to be no problem for her at all. Unable to suppress the turmoil in my heart, I decided to consult a lawyer. When I asked the lawyer to investigate, a shocking fact was revealed. Samantha's study abroad expenses had also been funded by my grandfather's inheritance. Without my knowledge, my grandfather's inheritance had been continually used solely for Samantha. Unable to contain my frustration and anger, I decided to sue for the return of the inheritance. At that time, my parents had just returned from the engagement party in Hawaii. Without any time to relish their pleasant trip, they were bewildered by the documents from the lawyer that had arrived at the house. What does this mean? My father, holding the papers, looked at my mother in confusion. Upon learning that I was formally demanding the return of a lawyer, my parents seemed to realize the seriousness of the matter for the first time. However, my resolve was unshaken. To correct years of unfairness, I decided to fight. Then, I took a step further and directly called Samantha's boyfriend. I told Samantha's boyfriend about my parents borrowing money from me and using the money my grandfather had left for my study abroad for her engagement party. At first, he refused to believe it, saying, "That can't be true." However, I calmly explained the facts and sent him emails as evidence. After a moment of silence, he exhaled softly and murmured, "Samantha never mentioned any of this to me." Eventually, this information reached his parents as well. As a result, my sister and parents completely lost their credibility, and Samantha's engagement was broken off. Samantha had managed to cover her study expenses with support from her boyfriend's parents, but she lost that support too. Ultimately, she couldn't continue her studies, and her dreams were shattered. Samantha blamed me, repeatedly slandering me on social media. The narrative was skewed to make it seem like all the fault was mine. After seeing Samantha's social media posts, my aunt contacted me, and I decided to tell her everything that had happened. My aunt was shocked but believed me and apologized on behalf of my mother for her treatment of me over the years. Even after receiving my aunt's apology, I couldn't bring myself to forgive my mother. The anger towards her betrayal did not subside, and my feelings did not ease. I also felt similarly closed off towards my sister and father. Reflecting on everything, I realized I had been the only one sacrificed while they lived at their convenience. I felt that the trust and affection as a family could never be restored. In the lawsuit, I won, and the money my grandfather had left me was fully returned. The wrongdoing of my parents and Samantha's side was exposed, and the judge recognized my claims. It was a long battle, but I was relieved that my grandfather's inheritance was restored to its rightful form. Though my relationship with my parents was irreparably broken, I had no regrets. I had righted the injustice and protected my rights. I'm sure my grandfather would be pleased with the outcome. I cut ties with my parents and decided to open my own bar using the money my grandfather had left me. Ready to completely change my lifestyle, I invested all my energy into building everything from scratch without looking back. The menu at my bar featured original cocktails I created, and their new flavors began to spread by word of mouth. Gradually, the reputation grew, and many customers started visiting my bar. In no time, my bar achieved success, and I felt a firm confidence in its accomplishment. Through my aunt, my mother tried several times to contact me, apologizing for the past and trying to rebuild our relationship. However, I ignored all her attempts. No matter what she said now, I no longer wanted any involvement with her, and her attempts only drove me further away. I didn't want to carry the burden of the past and focused fully on living in the present. One night, my bar was bustling with a full house of customers. Across the counter, I saw a scene of everyone smiling and enjoying their conversations with me at the center. It was a moment when the success I had achieved and the efforts I had made to get here bore fruit. Someday when work settles down, I plan to go study abroad, fulfilling the dream I once had. Freed from my family, I have carved out my life with my own efforts. I truly felt happy. The lights in the bar softly illuminated the interior, and I smiled quietly to myself.